Marathon, Bungie's coolest IP. The thing that makes the original trilogy my favorite is the obtuse approach to mystery. Like Destiny 1's Grimoire cards, there is room for interpretation and theory crafting with Marathon's mysteries. One of the denser mysteries from the original trilogy that I'd like to focus on is the Gherrit White terminal. This terminal holds a few records in Marathon. Awards: longest to read, hardest to get to, and most difficult to understand. The meaning of this terminal has been a topic of debate for over 30 years, and it's widely accepted that this terminal is either an analogy for Durandal's rampancy or that the player themselves are the titular Gherrit White. I've always enjoyed these more flowery interpretations because they inject a sense of literary prowess into the discussion. With that, I want to revisit this terminal and give my own thoughts on its meaning and how it might relate to the upcoming extraction shooter. In the third level of Marathon 1, Never Burn Money, there is a secret door. Behind the door is the Marathon's deprivation chamber. Commonly used for meditative relaxation as a means to decrease stress and improve sleep, it's an odd addition to the Lost Starship. Jumping into this chamber unprepared may be upsetting or infuriating to some, but there's no reason to be envious of those who have conquered the chamber before you. With a little practice, getting to this terminal will become the easiest part of understanding Gherrit White. In this chamber, aside from the multiple floor, is a shield recharge station, some ammo, and one of Marathon's power-ups. This one's invincibility. Because there is no dedicated jump button in the original Marathon, by exploiting the game's engine, we can climb the walls of the deprivation chamber by shooting grenades at our feet. Climbing out of the chamber, there is a teleporter that leads you to a hallway where the Gherrit White terminal is. Gherrit White had been floating 6 feet off the ground for 3 weeks. His feet and hands tingled, and his eyes burned with the flames of a dying fire. He had last heard someone speak to him as the cell door slammed shut. He didn't remember what the uniformed man had said. The words had bounced off the bars of the cell and rang through Gherrit's ears. Gherrit had been talking to himself for the last few minutes, something about getting caught, but then his ears began to tingle just like his hands. He looked at his hands, but the fire in his eyes made him blink. Tears came, and when he opened his eyes again, his hands had been melted into fleshy pancakes that wafted in the ripples flowing over the fire in his eyes. "Damn cell," he heard someone say. "Last time I had a good meal was 3 days ago. The food they feed you in here could kill a lab rat." Rats. He had remembered something about rats, but his ears began to ring again, and the voice speaking to him faded off and into the background of his mind. In its place, there was a new sound, the clapping of hands together. He blinked hard to make out his hands again. They had disappeared, his arms connected at the wrists. He thought back to the time he went ice skating on a pond. He remembered the sound of the skates on ice, a gentle scraping away now inside his ears, trying to tear down his thoughts. There had been a woman with a white fur tube over her hands. Her wrists were like his now, the wrists of someone who had tried too many times to clap his hands. He had been applauding everyone else in life but never himself. The hands, like himself, had been put into prison, and he didn't know why. "Can't sleep here. If the smell of this musty bedroll doesn't make you sick, and the sound of rats chewing inside the walls will keep you up. You'll wake up from your dreams to their little chomping. Sometimes I think they're chewing me." The voice was coming from inside the cell, but Gherrit couldn't see anyone. Gherrit hadn't always been alone. He could vaguely recall from somewhere inside his broken mind that there had been friends, lovers, murderers. He recalled a theory he had come up with after a bloody schoolhouse brawl. The theory was simple. At some point in time, everyone was a murderer. Whether they ever felt remorse, they had all wanted someone dead. Hatred. Everyone knew the feeling of hatred. Gherrit had known hatred on that schoolyard. His beater had laughed at their bloody faces, a laugh which now echoed through his ears, rhythmically blocking out the other voice in the cell. The schoolyard was usually a place where Gherrit and his friends would play football or foursquare or something, but today there was an edge. Maybe everyone had eaten cereal with milk that was about to go bad. Or maybe there was too much smoke in the air from the Wheeling hubcap factory. Football had been extremely rough. Gherrit had gone to play foursquare after he got tackled by 5 boys who weren't his friends. But today, even foursquare had an evil twist. The top square today had become habituated to making fun of the first square. Gherrit had decided that it was an evil day. When his beater started to push him around, he exploded. Hatred flowed from his eyes. His hands and feet began to tingle. All of his coordination left him, and his face was beaten to a bloody mess. The schoolyard disciplinarian had been slow to notice the ensuing carnage, and she didn't really care anyway. Gherrit would have killed him if he could have. He would have torn out the eyes of his beater. He would have made him pay for his abuses. But his hands began to tingle. He couldn't feel his feet and had begun to float off the ground. Everyone was a murderer, but Gherrit couldn't remember his reason for why that was so. He thought it was something about hands? The passion for justice? His hands and feet had begun to tingle, and he was floating farther off the ground. He looked up from his hands, and he saw the bars of the cell move left and right, opening wide and then closing shut like the surf coming up a beach. Every time that he thought he would be safe, the bars crested up, the opening, closing, the wave rising, crashing. The result would be the same. He would never escape. The bars would crush him, break his back. He could feel the roughness of the sand under his palms. For all the motion of the waves around him, his hands had come to rest serenely upon the ocean floor. His body tossed and flipped, pivoting about his hands under which he could feel the safe, coarse sand. The waves crashed one final time. He landed upside down. His hands thrown clear from the sandy bottom, the rush of water filling his ears, his nose, his mouth, the sound of crashing waves cascading down from his feet to his head, penetrating his mind to tear down thoughts. Like the sandcastle he built to withstand the tide, his thoughts came down around him. Gherrit had a good life. So much time. So much time. He had loved swimming, turning, beating. He had loved the tingle in his hands and feet, his inability to kill his nemesis. Once he had fallen down the stairs, and just for a moment his hands came to rest on the carpet of the stairs. In that instant, his body had frozen, floating over the stairs, safe from falling. But the moment didn't last. The ocean crashed about him. His hands tore free from the sandy bottom, his body flipping, falling. But now he levitated farther up, his hands still tingling. He began to float through the bars. He expected the instant of safety as his hands found footing, but that moment did not come. The bars squeezed his body. His chest tingled. As he fell through his cage, his legs tingled. The fire in his eyes had become a cold wind. He blinked away tears. He tumbled through the bars, spinning and turning. He could see a man. In his hand, he saw a small white rat. A pounding, The crashing waves in his ears became rhythmical, hard. The man was beating the rat against the floor, pounding, pounding. Blood covered his hands. The man's hands tingled. He had broken them on the floor of the cell. Disciplinarian, lover, murderer. Gherrit looked back into the cell. He saw himself, disciplinarian, lover, murderer. He had killed his nemesis. The rat lay dead in his bloody hands. At last, he held the throat of his beater. He escaped into the waves. The waves. I'm always so stunned after reading this terminal because it's so out of pocket when we consider Marathon's story so far. Up until this point, all we know is that the four have attacked the Marathon and that we are tasked with restarting the Marathon's defense systems. And then we find this terminal. My own working cat conspiracy is that Gherrit White is neither Durandal nor the player. I assert that Gherrit White is a regular crew member on board the Marathon who is being placed into stasis toward the beginning of the lost starship's journey. This suspended state is a common sci-fi trope used when spacefarers need to travel a distance that exceeds their predetermined lifespan. In the vision of Marathon ViDoc, we can see a row of suspended bags that are labeled Human, Frozen Asset during the section on cryoarchive. From here, I theorize that in order to suspend a human in such a state, a deprivation chamber could be used much like how surgeons use anesthesia. In other words, the body is about to undergo a potentially dangerous procedure and needs a delicate touch. An altered state of consciousness reached through deprivation may be the safest way to minimize damage to cellular tissue and brain function. If the process starts in the deprivation chamber, it would help explain the odd things Gherrit is experiencing, as hallucinations are common in deprivation tanks. The mixing of sensations and memories could be as simple as that. Exploring this theory, the hallucinations experienced in a deprivation tank occur when the brain can't perceive external stimuli. To compensate for the lack of stimuli and to maintain the same levels of brain activity, the brain will create its own sensory patterns. Gherrit may be perceiving the bag he is stored in as a cell. His perception of time warped while in the deprivation chamber as his bag is lifted into storage. The uniformed man could have been a Marathon staff member overseeing the procedure, complaining to a co-worker about the food and pests on board the Marathon. The feeling of a beach and the waves can be explained as dense salt in the fluid used during the deprivation into stasis process. The salt in deprivation tanks helps the body float effortlessly and could have been displaced as the bag was moved into stasis, creating this feeling of being tossed around the ocean. All of this, intercut with memories from Gherrit's past, create one of the most talked about terminals in the entire Marathon trilogy. With that, I would love to hear what you think about this terminal. Do you like a more literal interpretation that describes Gherrit as a passenger going through the process of cryostorage? Or do you prefer the more poetic takes that propose Gherrit is an AI experiencing rampancy? Regardless of interpretation, we can all agree that this terminal is the cornerstone of Marathon's lore community and serves as the perfect example of how a perpetually unanswered mystery creates palpable discussions and is good for the overall health of the lore community. If the mystery isn't answered, there will always be someone who is looking to solve it. And without a definitive answer from Bungie as to what this terminal really means, the mystery stretches out for a regulation distance of 26.219 miles, otherwise known as a marathon. Thanks for watching.
Like Come and don't please subscribe. Thank you for watching.